Thank you, Ray. I'm Jane Nixon. I'm chairing this session this morning, which is about pressure ulcers. It's a really exciting programme which combines, which is really about collaboration. It's about service change and innovation, and it's about patient involvement in the development of practice and management of change. So I'm delighted that we start this morning with a presentation from Melanie Stephens and Carol Bartley, who are both from Salford, and I'd like to welcome them to the stage to talk about their work around TVS guidelines in seating and posture.
Good morning. First of all, before we start the presentation, Carol and I would really like to thank the Tissue Viability Society trustees. We thank you for giving us this fabulous opportunity and working with us in regards to the development of the guidelines and also facilitating the listening event and the thorough peer review process. We're really grateful for you for that. We'd also like to thank the members of the stakeholder group and for those people who came to the listening event in January at the university. Again, this all was part of informing the process. So what we'd like to do in the next 20 minutes is actually share with you the process involved in writing the Tissue Viability Seating Guidelines of 2017. So our objectives for the next 20 minutes are to explore the need for the review, the stages of the review process, the content of the guidelines, and a particular part in the document is we call things alerts. So we want to alert you to either best practice or practice that we should no longer be carrying out. And then finally share with you the next steps in relation for you getting hold of the documents, whether it's in open access or hard copies. So why did we need to do this review? Sorry. Never thought I'd be this nervous. And this is for someone who's very loud normally. So we were approached by the Tissue Viability Society trustees to amend or develop new guidelines in relation to seating. The last ones were written in 2008, and we all know as clinicians, academics, researchers, practitioners, that a lot has happened since 2008 in relation to evidence and subsequent care moving forward. We know that the cost of pressure ulcers, both prevention and management, has increased significantly. And if you actually look and do a search through the literature, there has been limited published evidence in regards to health and social care seating organisations and their guidance on seating and preventing pressure ulcers. So we wanted to think differently about who these guidelines were for. And specifically, the main people are actually those who remain seated for extended periods of time, then their carers, and then finally the health and social care professionals, education and training staff, and the independent sector. So really, a holistic approach is who are these guidelines for? They're for anybody who lives or works in the primary, secondary or tertiary settings. So we want to discuss the stages of the process. We want to give you a bit more information about how we went about the development of the guidelines. So like good academics, the first place we start is the evidence base. So the first thing we wanted to do was conduct a thorough review of the literature. So we conducted a literature search in May and September of 2016 using a PICO framework. We searched various databases. We also looked through grey literature and then went to hand searching. And finally, by using an inclusion and exclusion criteria and abstract screening from 554 citations, 22 inform the cushion and chair selection of the guidelines in particular. If you want to read more about the methodology, it will be in the appendices of the document when it's released online. So the next thing we decided to do, we have the literature, we've searched through that to provide the evidence base, but it shouldn't always be about what's out there in relation to academic and clinical research. What we wanted to do is gather both public and expert opinion. So we were really, really lucky that the trustees, there's such a fabulous group of people to work with, that we had a stakeholder group. And we recruited people from the trustees, members of our schools, health sciences service user group, academics and clinicians from our local areas. The purpose of involving users and carers in the development of the guidelines and as a significant stakeholder was because of two main categories. First of all, the democratic principles of the provision of health and social care, and also for service improvement. You come from a very different place when you understand what the service user requires in relation to their seating needs. And it was really important for us that they became the voice of our guidelines. So the stakeholder group's role was to peer review the draft guidelines and make sure we met the necessary standards before it's published and accepted. And also, they did a tremendous job helping us assist us in the facilitation of the listening event. So after we'd had the stakeholder group meetings and a draft of the first publication of the guidelines were produced, we then held a listening event. And the listening event, if you look at what a listening event is, Healthwatch UK give a really nice definition. So it's a range of techniques that engage the public and gather their views about social and health care. So we wanted to do things slightly differently because we wanted to engage everybody. So academics, clinicians, service users and their carers, all who had an interest in seating, positioning and pressure ulcer prevention and management. So we wanted this to facilitate this listening event, to gather views, feedback, stories and evidence of current practices in the field. We wanted to develop our greater awareness of the complexity of the issue of providing seating for those who sit for extended periods of time. We also wanted to collect opinions of effectiveness of current commercially available products and then share best practice. And I think we achieved that in the day that we held. And then finally, with the resending of drafts, so the revision and editing process and the peer review process.
Okay, so the content within the guidelines is, the full document is fairly long, but we did that because we wanted to make sure that we got everything in there in the content. So the first thing that we thought about, which actually reflects on our listening event, was inclusivity. So in that, we didn't want to be condition specific because that would exclude certain population groups. So when we say people sitting for extended periods of time, that could be somebody in the acute sector or somebody in long term as well. So it's anybody really who has to sit for a long period of time, maybe due to their condition or due to something event that's happened to them. What we also did was we referred to the international classification of function, disability and health, and we used that because of the way they have written their guideline. So their guideline is very inclusive of all populations throughout the world. It was actually backed by the World Health Organization, and the ICF applies to all irrespective of their condition. It's relevant across all cultures, which is a focus that we've had on our guidelines too. And it looks at all aspects of a person's life, including the environment, which again is something that we referred to in our document. So where do pressure ulcers develop when seated? I mean, everybody's probably seen the images of the usual suspects, but what wasn't in the guidelines was other areas that we see that are quite vulnerable as well. And that includes the elbows, the occiput. If somebody has a headrest on their chair, the occiput is an area where a pressure ulcer could develop, and also as well the medial aspect of the knees. So I'm an occupational therapist and I've worked in seating, and from a postural point of view, if somebody has an internal rotation at the hips, it will push the knees together, and that then leads to another risk area for somebody to develop a pressure ulcer. Again, we're also looking at risk factors as well. So in looking at risk factors, you're looking at things like We referred to the Reactive Ed questionnaire, and we adapted that slightly. That's included in the document as well. So it gives people a really user-friendly document to have a look at. So it could be somebody's mum or somebody's dad or the daughter, and they can have a look at that. There's a few simple questions that they can have a look at, and then it will alert them to maybe contact their health professional. So what we're trying to do is to empower people to take responsibility themselves as well, because it has to be a two-way, it has to be a collaboration. It can't just come from the clinicians. We have to actually give back power to the person who's in that situation so they can take responsibility as well. The other risk factors, which you probably all know, are things like poor nutrition as well, general health, and also as well, some people actually can't move. They are actually in their chair. I have done moulded seating with people who cannot move. So it's about also educating the carers and their relatives to be able to reposition that person if they can, or get them out of the chair as well to relieve those areas of pressure. So after you consider risk factor, we also look at the seating assessment, because we wanted this document. It could be for a newly qualified person, and they might not know anything about it. And I know when I first came into seating, I actually referred to the original document. I found it very, very useful. It gave some really handy tips in it. So what we've done is we're looking at the seating assessment, and then we're just looking at things like, in the seating assessment, first of all, yesterday somebody was talking about the minimum data sets, and that actually applies here as well. So you're looking at the person's past medical history. Do they have a history of pressure ulcer development as well? Looking at also as well the nutrition. Most important of all, I think, and this is my opinion, is the person's own opinion. The person sat in front of me, what do they think? I'll have views on what I think, but I'm more interested in what they think. How do they see their situation? So take me through your typical day. It gives me an idea of how long a person's sitting in a chair. Okay. After we've looked at the seating assessment, then we're looking at the ideal position. That person up there is not in an ideal sitting position, okay? A 90-90-90 sitting position is not ideal. It's the person's ideal position. It's their what we call preferred posture. It might not be what I think is the right posture for them, but their preferred posture is what we have to work with. Because if I try and move somebody out of that, then they're not going to conform to the equipment that I give them. Okay, so looking at the ideal seated position, we need to consider seat width, seat height, backrest height, footrests, armrests, headrests, everything included. There's no point in just looking at the actual seat the person's sitting on. There's all the other factors that have to be considered as well. Because if I sit somebody on the correct seat and I haven't got the foot plates or their feet aren't resting on the floor correctly, I'm actually going to increase the risk at the ischial tuberosities for that person. So when we've looked at the ideal seated position as well, this also includes looking at the cushion as well for that person. So the same thing applies really. You're looking at the depth of the cushion, the width, how does it pressure map as well? Are the properties in that cushion? You'll see the literature, it'll say this cushion is for high risk. I don't actually know how companies can say that, because they might have mapped it on somebody who's very symmetrical. It could be a member of staff, it could be anybody. All the people that we see are all complete individuals. So when we're looking at pressure mapping as well, if it maps well, it doesn't always mean the person, that's the right cushion for that person. Because if they don't like it, they'll take it home and they'll put it under the stairs, it'll collect dust, and that person then will be at more risk because they're not using anything. So looking at interventions, the things that we're thinking about are education as well. So it's about communicating with the person all the time, and communicating, as we know, 80% of it is listening for us, listening to what the person, and actually listening and not being ready to jump back in with something. Listen to what they're saying, listen to what they want, listen to what they feel that they need, and then we work together. So it's joint goals. We listen to what their goals are. We will have clinical goals, and it's about joining those together to come up with the best possible solution for that person. The other thing as well is we're looking at the physiological abilities of that person. So we're looking at their ability to be able to breathe, swallow. It could be, if you're looking at things like tilt in space, that's very, very important. Tilt in space, you can actually impede somebody's breathing, but you can actually, as well, you can help them with their breathing and the physiological aspects. And what we're saying is it's about that holistic assessment process. Looking at some self-help strategies as well. Again, giving power back to that person and saying to them, this is what we think will help you. You go away and you try these things and see if you can do them. So we've got some of those in the document as well. And we referred to the skin bundle when we did that. And when we were developing the guidelines, we actually came up with another S. So we've got skins. So the S at the end is actual general sickness. That can actually put people at risk. Sometimes we don't realise that. If somebody's generally unwell, the physiological aspects of what's going on can actually increase their risk of a pressure ulcer as well. Okay, so the next slide, the next few slides are, we've picked out the alerts that we've put into the guidelines. And when you have a look at them, you will see a yellow triangle and it'll have an exclamation mark and an alert underneath. And we'd like you just to have a look at them because they're some of the things that we think should really be highlighted so that you have it, you're aware of them.
So the first alert in the document is helping people understand ways of identifying areas of risk and how to identify whether there is actually underlying damage that's occurring. So we make reference to Reactive Ed's Blanche test and a link to their lovely little video, but also we actually, in the alert, give instructions of how to conduct a Blanche test. But we also make clear that the Blanche test is only really useful for people who have Caucasian skin or pale skin, and therefore we make reference to people from Afro-Caribbean and Asian backgrounds with high levels of melanin and keratin about understanding assessment of their own skin as well. And we've put a clear guidance that if the skin does not react or does not subside, then they seek professional help. We also alert the people reading the document about other areas of risk. So in relation to wheelchair users, the palms of the hands are at particular risk of developing pressure ulcers with propulsion of the wheelchair. The genital area for being sat for a long or extended periods of time and with moisture trapping, how that can develop into pressure ulcers. And then also the risk of medical device related pressure ulcers from the equipment they're using, whether that be catheters, leg bags, belts and slings.
Another alert that we thought was necessary to put up there was the footstool. Some people, I know when I've done home visits and people have said, oh, I've got some swelling in my legs and, can you get the footstool? Actually, using the footstool can increase somebody's area of risk. When somebody sat in the chair and you put their feet on the footstool, you're transferring the pressure backwards because the person will probably be sat in more or less a 90 at the hips and then fully extended at the knees. They'll be maybe flexed at the ankles as well, so the pressure's going down through the heels and then transferring back to the ITs. So what we said in there is that if people do say that, then there is evidence out there and guidelines out there for managing edema, and that we ask people to seek professional help with regard to that. Okay, as well. As an occupational therapist, I would be involved in prescribing cushions, but I would do that in collaboration with the TVN. I would often do a joint visit with them, and we'd have a look at things together. We'd pressure map and decide between us, based on both of our skills and knowledge, what would be the best thing for that person. However, when you actually pressure map, like what I said earlier, don't always rely on something that pressure maps really well. For example, the Roho cushion, which is it's called the egg, the egg box shape one. Everybody, that pressure maps so well throughout the world. Actually though, when you ask people, a lot of people don't want to sit on it because it's unstable because of the air in it. So even though I might sit somebody on that and it maps so well, if I leave that with them and they don't feel stable in the chair, they're not going to use it. The other thing about these cushions as well is the maintenance of them. If it's overinflated, it can actually lead to pressure ulcers. If it's underinflated and it bottoms out, the person will be sat on a very hard surface. So it's just to be mindful that when you are looking at cushions and things, that you look at more than just whether a company shows you the the bottom, as there is in that picture, with the cushion, say this is how this maps, that you actually look at all of the factors that are included as well. This is one of my little bugbears, to be honest. This is recline. So tilt and recline are two different things. I've been called into nursing homes where they said, oh, Mrs. Jones is sliding in the chair. And when I've got there, it's because they've opened the seat to back angle. That's what recline is. So recline will keep the seat in the same position, but the back angle will open. So if you open that, not only does it encourage sliding because you have gravity pulling as well, it also can cause shear problems. And then when the chair is put back in the upright position, you've got that shear force again going through the back. So be mindful about things like tilt and recline. The other thing as well is, I know we're talking about seating, but some people have sit-to-stand wheelchairs. So that's another thing to bear in mind. That's part of the 24-hour posture management, and that's the message I've tried to get out, is the chair, the cushion, the wheelchair, the bed, and maybe the standing frame. They all form part of a 24-hour pressure management system for somebody. And the thing with the sit-to-stand as well is it can reduce the occurrence of water infections, abnormal muscle tone, skeletal deformities, and enhances well-being. Because as you can see, that person can stand. You can stand at the bar in that wheelchair. You know, you can stand with your friends, whatever. You know, so it actually increases somebody's well-being.
And then what the final alert in the document is about people, looking at people, using our principles of look, listen and feel. And as we state here, people may not always tell you how they feel, but they will show you, so pay attention. As from a nursing background, I can see people when they're not feeling very well. They give these verbal cues, non-verbal cues, physiological changes. So what's next? We're just trying to finalise the guidelines at the moment. They should be ready in the next few months. We're just trying to finalise the medical illustration. There's going to be development of a quick reference guide and 2 publications for the autumn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's really interesting, and that you've actually also incorporated some of the key initiatives that are going on with the Reactive Ed programme. And it sounds like it's very much geared around patients.
It is.
So I was sat here thinking, are you actually talking to the right people? In terms of, you know, the general nurse and general carer, and this sort of some of these basic principles of seating that we just don't get in our normal curriculum, and we don't hand on to each other. So do you feel that there's how can we work together as sort of the seating world and the pressure ulcer world? Sorry, I'm hogging the questions.
Yeah. Obviously, where we work, we're really lucky with the University of Salford, because we're part of the Greater Manchester Academic Health Network. There's the Manchester Science Festival, occurs in November this year. I know it's not till November, and we've been talking to Ray this morning that one of the stands is actually in Piccadilly Station. So we actually take a chair and cushions, and we actually, with the Tissue Viability Society, will hold a stand there and talk to the people coming in and out of Piccadilly Station for the weekend and share the guidelines. And
pressure map the bottoms as well.
Yeah, and have bits of fun with
people like to see
all
that.
people. But to us, it's using things like science festivals, museums, thinking alternatively with how we then take the guidelines out there. And we're lucky, we've got fantastic people like Nicola and Chris and our service user groups, so we're going to be engaging them in that as well.
I think as well we're also using them in our teaching as well, because again it's not a very high priority, it doesn't seem that way. So I know for me, I've sneaked things into modules, and I'll definitely be highlighting the tissue viability guidelines, because even my students already are asking me and they're tweeting back to me, or when can we have access to those? So I'll definitely be shouting out about it and hopefully getting more in as well.
Okay, that's great. I'm really sorry I've monopolised the questions, which is really bad as a chair, but we've run out of time. But obviously, you're both around for the rest of the day. So thank you very much.
Thank you.